Well, good evening and welcome, everyone. I'm just going to give my glasses a moment to unfog, as I'm sure many of you appreciate. Okay, I'm Cheryl Gares. I'm Acting Chair of Science, and we have certainly faced some challenges in the last few months, trying to cope with and adapt to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, this evening gives us an opportunity to celebrate as we acknowledge that our colleague, Dr. James Kariuki, has been promoted to the highest rank in academic life, full professor. The Distinguished Professor Lectures we host at Augustana are a wonderful way to publicly honor our colleagues, but one of the things I find particularly important is that family members have a rare opportunity to observe their loved one as the professor instead of a parent or a child or a spouse. So I particularly welcome James's family for attending this evening. This is such a great moment to share, as I said, with our families as well as our colleagues. Dr. Kariuki, or Coach James, as the posters indicated, is a professor of chemistry. James and I have been office neighbors in the science building for about a dozen years or so, and this has given me the opportunity to regularly watch James interact with his students. So whether he's mentoring young and ambitious research students or tutoring students that are really struggling to understand the basics of chemistry, he is always calm, kind, and willing to give of himself. And this is certainly one of the many reasons why using the coaching analogy is so suitable to describe James, or James's teaching. Just before I introduce James, I just want to make an announcement. After the presentation, I will moderate a question and answer period, but because we're unable to have an audience microphone at this time, please remain in your seat and raise your hand, and I will repeat your question in my own microphone for Dr. Kariuki to answer. All right, and now to introduce you to the man of the hour and hear more about the teaching coaching nexus, here's Dr. James Kariuki, Professor.
So, good evening, all of you, those who've come here to the Lohit Center, and those listening via broadcast, whatever you are tonight or in the morning. So, this is a big, special night for me. Normally, my students know me wearing a lab coat or handling glassware in the lab, but here I am wearing a suit and a tie, meaning that this is a very special day. And I hope that my talk will inspire kids, whatever you are listening, that one day you can also aspire to be in the same position as I am. So I'm gonna, in the next half an hour or so, tell you about my journey from where I was born and how I actually got into teaching. And as Cheryl just said, I'm calling myself a chemistry coach. So I want to start by acknowledging that the land on which we gather, traditionally known as the Aniskwa Sipsis, is 3-6 territory and a traditional meeting ground for many indigenous peoples. And that the land on which the Augustana campus of the University of Alberta is located provided a traveling route and home to the Maskachis, Nahiawak, Nisitapi, Nakoda, Tsuut'ina nations, the Métis, and other indigenous people. Their spiritual and practical relationships to the land create a rich heritage for learning and our life as a community. So we all know the saying, a journey of 1,000 steps starts with one step. And so just want to tell you where it all began. Also, I'll be going to what I'm calling commercial breaks. I'm not telling you anything, so please stay in your seats. It's going to be telling you about places I've been to, also show you a couple of nice pictures of my home birth country of Kenya. I'll tell you about when I came to Canada, also spend a little bit of time telling you about how students learn. I'll show you some chemistry that you can see. I'll tell you how and why I call myself a chemistry coach, my research, and about giving back to the community. So I was born in Kenya in a central part of Kenya. It's in a city called Murang'a, and on the one side here, that's one of my early pictures, my mom, and over here is the Kenyan flag, the typical colors. It becomes so prominent that almost every Kenyan wears a little something on their arms with the Kenyan flag. So, grew up like any typical young boy. I went to elementary school, which is called primary school. I went to secondary school, then to high school, and then I got my 2 degrees at Kenyatta University, both a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Science. So, as I said, now and then I'm going to go into commercial breaks. I'm already going to go to my very first commercial break here. So, I want to show you over here, my family and I studying right on the equator, which crosses Kenya. And then some pictures of wildlife from Masai Mara National Park. And the wild beast migration is a big phenomena, or sometimes referred to as one of the 8 wonders of the world. Now, many of you here in the audience or listening via broadcast, you probably know that President Obama's father was born in Kenya. And while there, we got a chance to visit with Obama's grandmother. We were welcomed like celebrities, and we had a big chat. And unfortunately, we are unable to contact the president himself, but it was a big moment for us. And on the right side is a rhino from one of the conservancies in Kenya. And over here, we have, very near Nairobi, an elephant and rhino orphanage. So some of these elephants, they are captured when they are sick or brought in here, given treatment, and later on they are released into the wild. So let me tell you about how it all started as a teacher for me. I was actually a high school teacher before, and I taught at a couple of high schools in Kenya. And then I became a lecturer at one of the local universities called Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology. In 1995, I came to Canada, U of A in Edmonton. My PhD was in analytical chemistry. And after my PhD, I did a postdoc for a couple of years, but with a different professor. So in this segment here, I just want to tell you about an African proverb. It sounds like something like "Guthie nekuona." So what this really means is that travel broadens the mind. So I'm going to be showing you or telling you about places that I've visited, not just because I want to show off, but because when I went to these places, I kept my eyes and ears open to see how other people think and basically to learn from different people and different cultures. So here we go. That's me in Nara, Japan, and also in many parts of Nova Scotia. So how did I start as a chemistry coach? So my very first teaching appointment in North America was in Nebraska, USA. So you might ask, Nebraska, why did you go to Nebraska? It's because I thought that Nebraska was much warmer than Edmonton. And so when I got there, it turned out not to be so warm. And I said, I'm going back to Canada. And so I came to King's College. And after that, I was employed here at Augustana in 2005, promoted to associate professor in 2011. And just this year, I was given the big title of professor, and that's why I stand before you today giving this talk. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes. I want to tell you something about how do students learn. So to do that, I'm going to take something from a textbook I used in one of my classes. So I know there's a lot on this slide here. But I want to tell you a few things that you have to think about students' prior knowledge. So what do they know? before they come to your class? How do students organize their knowledge? How students' motivation? How students must practice integrating component skills, targeted feedback, the course climate, and also that students must learn to monitor and adjust their approaches to learning. So therefore, then, to be able to help students learn, we all know that if you are playing a sport, basketball, soccer, whatever it is, you cannot be any good if you just sit and watch other people's play. You have to be engaged. So then a teacher's job becomes to facilitate the learning. And therefore, I refer myself as a chemistry coach, whereby I guide my students through the learning process in the same way a basketball coach would do with his team. So to help students learn, you should always avoid the so-called expert's blind spot. So what this means is that just because you as the prof know a lot, don't assume that your students know as much. Also, help students assess their prior knowledge, help your students develop metacognition skills. And this is thinking about their own thinking. And use examples that connect to students' everyday knowledge. Please allow me to go into a little commercial break here, and I show you where I've been to Australia and to Sweden. As a chemistry coach, I have taught a number of courses here at Augustana. These include a first-year seminar, a first-year chemistry courses, senior mentorship experience course, directed studies, and a chemistry capstone course. I want to give you some details about some of the courses that I taught. I'll start by the first-year seminar, and in this seminar, students take one course in a 3-week block. My course was on food, and what did we learn in this class? So we learned about organic versus conventional foods, sustainable farming practices. We learned about genetically modified foods, functional foods, and nutrition. We also learned about some interesting things. For example, salt was once used as a wage to pay salary. In fact, I believe the word salt comes from Italian for salarium, meaning salt. Also, in this first-year seminar course, we learned about foods for the future. For example, we learned that we actually be eating cricket flour, meat from plants, and some interesting things. For example, why does chopping an onion make you cry? Why does bacon taste so good? But I think for me, the main takeaway in this class was that we learned that there's 30% of the food in the world is wasted, not because the food is bad or cannot be eaten, but because, for example, a banana looks crooked, a little scratch on an apple, and so on. So just pure waste of food. In my senior mentorship experience class, in this class, senior students served as instructors for first-year labs. And so my students were able to acquire mentorship and leadership skills. They developed oral and written communication skills. And I think most importantly, they made a significant contribution to the education of other students. So I'm going to take a couple moments here to ask all of us, what makes an effective teacher? And the literature says a number of things. And some of them are so-called common sense things. For example, respect all your students, be a good listener, are lifelong learners, are flexible, they show empathy, they set high expectations, they have patience, they demonstrate subject knowledge and passion, they have a sense of humor, they are able to build caring relationships with their students, they value real-world learning, and also engage students in the learning process. In this commercial break, I am showing my family over here. We went to Zanzibar, And if you can see that on the screen or on your devices, this is Freddie Mercury, who was actually born in Zanzibar, and we were able to visit the house where he grew up. So now I'm going to switch gears here a little bit and tell you about my research. So growing up as a kid in Kenya, we actually used these batteries known as Everready. And I remember as a kid, I would take the used batteries. I have to admit I was a little bit curious. Okay, I was a little bit naughty kid. So I would open it up, and what I would see are metal electrodes, and I wondered what they do. But now I know. So if you open up a battery, what you see are two electrodes, different metals. There's a barrier separating the two and some solution. And in summary, electrons flow from one side to the other one, and they light up your bulb. So then in my research, I have a number of goals. Goal number one is to make the electrodes that we saw better electrodes. And a point of note is that electrode reactions only occur at the surface. So for example, let's imagine that we have a yellow surface showing a poor electrode, and you want to make it red surface for a good electrode. So what we can do, or what I do in my lab, is to apply thin films, and we call that modifying the electrode surface. A good analogy is painting a wall. So let's assume you don't like the color yellow, so you take a can of paint and you paint it red. So it's called modifying your wall. It's like modifying your electrode. My goal number two was to make low-cost electrodes. So metal and carbon electrode are expensive. As an example, showing one electrode here that would cost $50 for one piece of electrode. And we found in my lab that we can actually replace the electrodes with pencils. And think about it, $50 for an electrode, $1, you can grab this at the dollar store, 20 of them for $1, and they're going to work as good as the commercial electrodes. But a good question is, do they really work? Well, we tested them using tea samples. But before we could do that, I didn't know that there were so many pencils. There were hard ones. They labeled them H. There were soft ones. They labeled them B. So we wondered, which one are we going to use? So we tested all of them. And let me tell you a little bit about pencils. The way they make them hard or soft is the amount of clay. So they add different amounts of clay, and the harder pencils have more amounts of clay. And it turned out that the clay did help the pencils become better electrodes. So which one did we choose? We actually went up with the most common pencil, HB, or number 2 electrode. So to test my pencils, we made tea with a commercial home brewer just for consistency. We put the tea in these containers in the lab. Then, of course, I sharpened my pencils to make sure they're ready for testing. Then I put my tea in this device here. So here's the pencil, and then I hooked it to a computer. And what did we see? What we see is this graph here, current here, voltage. But to tell if the pencil is a better electrode, we just measured this line here. If you look, the blue line is larger than the red line. What this simply means is that the pencil is a better electrode than the carbon electrode. In my research goal number 3, we used a 3D printer that we have at our Augustana lab, and we made components of electrodes, as you can see on the screen, and then we tested the electrodes. This time we used orange juice. We used orange juice to test the 3D printed electrodes and compare them to the commercial ones. So I could ask you, Do those graphs look similar? And I know your answer is yes, they do look similar. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. What that tells us is that the 3D printed electrodes at a low cost work as good as the commercial electrodes. Next, we wanted to make systems that are small, inexpensive, and portable that you can carry with you. So look at our current systems, large, expensive. So what we did is that we made a small system. We called it an electroanalytical kit. The total cost was about $150. So if you open this box here, what you see the inside is the machine to test the electrode, and here are our electrodes that we made with a 3D electrode. And it's time for a commercial break. So here I am visiting Ottawa and visiting Toronto. Some of the research that I showed you actually got published or disseminated. For example, we are able to publish in the Journal of Chemical Education with my research assistants as co-authors. And here's another publication. This time is in the International Journal of Food Properties. And as I take a drink here, we go to another little commercial break. Here I am in Chicago and Vancouver. So where are we going from here? So now what? So what are we going to do with these kits? They're not quite done yet. They're almost done. So they're almost complete, and they need a little bit more testing. But once they're done, what we hope to do with them, for high schools, we just donate them for experiments. And for first-year chemistry labs as well. And in my lab or other undergraduate institutions, they can be used for their research. Also, they can be used for on-site testing of water and other samples. Please allow me to go into another small commercial break where I've been to Niagara Falls, been to Finland, and been to Denmark. Now, I will switch gears yet again to service to the community. As you're reading that quote by Winston Churchill, what comes out is that we make a life by what we give. So the importance of giving back to the community. So here is me in Malmo Elementary School in Edmonton. This is a special one because the teacher in that class is Miss Kariuki, who is my daughter and here in the audience. So it was a special moment for me to be able to teach in her class. And you can see here I am showing some chemistry demonstrations to future scientists in Miss Kariuki's class. Also, here in Camrose, we have had students come to our labs or our theater for chemistry demonstrations, and from both elementary and junior high schools. And here's me getting maybe a little bit too carried away, showing students all sorts of demonstrations, fun chem demonstrations. In terms of my service to the university, I have served in numerous committees, too many to list, but I want to point out two of them. One of them I've served in what's called the Faculty Evaluation Committee, FEC. And this committee deals with, for example, merit increments, tenure, promotion, also faculty studies of performance. It's also my honor to be serving now as the Associate Dean of Teaching. And one of my jobs is to help or offer teaching support for faculty. In addition, initiatives to enrich the learning experiences of undergraduate students. Little commercial break. I know you're not bored. I can see you're still smiling, listening. So, little commercial break. Washington, D.C., and to Atlanta. They said it's the city that was too busy to hit. Now, it's time for what I call chemistry that you can see. So chemistry you can see. This time you're not talking about moles or calculations. This time is chemistry you can actually see with your own eyes. So let's start this way. So I wake up in the morning, I look in my house, I find all these things, and I'm asking myself, are these acids? Are they bases? Please help me. How am I going to tell? So what I do, I take a red cabbage, make some soup, and then so put it in some water, so I know that water is neutral, so the color is blue. And then I remembered that vinegar is an acid. So it was color red, so now I know that anything acidic is gonna turn red. So now I'm happy I'm testing all sorts of stuff in my house, and I do baking soda, it's blue, lemon juice, red, soapy water, it's blue, basic, pop, red, I know it's acidic, and orange is acidic. And I was having so much fun, so I just put everything together and took one last picture over here. And another little commercial break. This is a Amboseli National Park in Kenya with elephants and giraffes. And also another very famous national park is, again, I think I showed some pictures before, Masai Mara National Park, where you can see the so-called Big Five, or the large animals. And continuing now with chemistry, you can see, I'm going to show you a video.
When I'm teaching my students in class, I always tell them that in chemistry, you can tell if a reaction is happening, if there's a color change, or if there's a heat change, or if something smells. So I have, in this container, I have a solution that's color orange, and I'm going to shake it a little bit, and I'm going to ask you to focus on the color and see if you can see any color change. So now, as I shake the flask, you see that the color starts to change to red, and I keep shaking the flask, and keeping an eye to see if there's any color change, and eventually you see that the color changes to green. So what we saw is that the color cycled from yellow to orange to green, so clearly there's a chemical reaction going on. So I can ask you, where have you seen that sequence of colors? And I'm sure you're guessing traffic light, and that is correct. This chemical reaction is called a traffic light reaction, and the color can occur due to changing the amount of air in the liquid.
I'm going to show you another video.
We can tell if a chemical reaction is happening if there's a color change. So I have a solution that looks blue, and now I'm going to put this solution in ice cold water, and you see there's any color change. So here is the ice bath, and I am putting my solution in there, cool it down, and in a moment I'll take it out. And so it looks like the color change here is due to the temperature change. So what if I put this in a hot water bath, so hot water, and give it a few minutes, and you see if there's any color change. And you can see that just by putting the solution either in hot or cold water, we see a color change from blue to pink. So you might ask yourself, where can this type of technology be used? If a family has a young baby, you probably have used one of these spoons that I use to tell if the food for the baby is too hot or too cold. So if I put this in hot water, you see that the blue part is now clear, And that's how you tell if the food is too hot for the baby. And if you put the spoon into the cold water bath, it goes back to blue. So the type of materials used to make these spoons are called thermochromic, meaning that they change color due to the temperature.
Okay, so next I will continue with a slide on service to the community. So this is an NGO in Kenya. It's called Utoni Development Organization, and it has a connection to Camrose because it's sponsored by Sahakarini. So Sahakarini is a local NGO here in Camrose, and the dean's wife is the chair. Lita is the chair of this NGO. So Dr. Vaugis Manalo and I and our families visited Kenya, and we were taken to the project site. So what they do is they make these dams, and the water can be used for irrigation. So here they were showing us how they obtain the water and then take it to where they're going to irrigate, whether it's for growing vegetables or other little crops. And over here, we were hosted by the members of the NGO, and just they told us about the success. And generally, they were quite grateful with the sponsorship that they got from Sahakarini. So if there are any members of the community here from Sahakarini, thank you for that. Also, when Vaugis and his family were there, we got together, and Vaugis at that time came with all his family. There's Usha, and the sons, Robin and Rohan, and also parts of my family here as well. So this hospital is sponsored by Bethany Relief and Rehabilitation International, and it's based in Canada. So the goal of going to this hospital, we hope that in future, when I'm planning a study abroad tour to Kenya, my students can use this hospital as one of the places that they go to learn about certain experiments or whatever subject they're following, whether it's chemistry or biology. Audience, wherever you are here or listening of a broadcast, it's time to engage you as I would engage my students in class. Please take out your devices and please go to socrative.com. As a student, you don't have to sign in. So when you see student login, click there and please enter. My classroom number is Kariuki 9663. So socrative.com student code is Kariuki 9663. So thank you for those who are able to pass my reader test and find in the website and actually been able to log in. So it's Kariuki 9663 is the classroom code. Kariuki, Kariuki 9663. So this type of activity, I would use it with my students, for example, to get some instant feedback about, say, a topic that I'm teaching. And I use it to gauge if they're understanding. And based on their responses, then I would think of either reteaching that particular topic. So for the audience, I did just ask you a simple question. And right now, I know people are joining from elsewhere, about 32, 25 out of 33 answered. So I'll just give you a couple of seconds here, and then I will review to see what people are voting as their favorite color. Just give you a couple of seconds here. And now we look and we see, blue. So if you've seen some of those TV shows and magicians are saying things and they say, I knew the answer is going to be blue. So how did I know it? You tested yourself. So next time you have an audience of 30 to 40 or even less, ask them to take this vote. 100% promise you the answer will be blue. So I knew it is going to be blue, and for sure it's blue. So let's do another question. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to input your answers. So which food item is most likely to be a counterfeit? Just waiting for a few more people to register their vote. And then we'll see what you think. Is it coffee? Is it olive oil? Is it honey? Is it cheese? Is it milk? And here we go. Okay. Oh, this is a knowledgeable audience. A knowledgeable audience tuned in here, those who are here and those tuned in. It's indeed true that most likely the olive oil you are using in your house, most likely, I'm not saying it is, but most likely it's a counterfeit. So what they do, they add other cheap oils just to think that you're buying the real oil. So it's the most commonly counterfeited item. Honey, of course, is another one as well. Cheese, milk it is, and also coffee as well. But olive oil is the number one item. So thank you so much for participating in my survey. So I'll exit here and go back to my slides. So since 2005, when I came to Augustana, I have taught a lot of students, 1,500 students. So students, alumni, whatever you are, let me take this chance to thank you. I actually learned a lot from you. Hopefully I taught you some stuff, but I also learned a lot from you. So thank you so much. I want to thank students who worked in my lab or my classes to help me teach, research assistants. Ben Smith worked with me for a number of projects, and now in graduate school, and he was a winner of several awards at national conferences. Also, I have Emily, who is now a doctor of dental surgery at the U of A, and Carly Olafson, who is an RA in Edmonton as well. Other students, again, here's Ben, Michaela, and Shailene, who have worked in my lab. Over here is Emily again. I have Uyen and Jinwan, and both Uyen and Jinwan were international students sponsored by MITAX. And Jia Hui Lee was also an international student in my lab. A couple of other students that I didn't have their photos, but I want to acknowledge them as well. Jeffrey, Julia, Tatiana, and Kaylee. So let me take this moment to acknowledge my family here in the audience. You've been with me in the journey. Thank you for your support. Appreciate it. So here is my wife, Dolly, kids, Nancy, Ken, and Naomi, and also our dog, Crosby, over here. So also family and friends listening all over the world, I want to thank you. Those in Kenya, here in Canada, those in Australia, Sweden, USA, and elsewhere that you may be listening, thank you for tuning in tonight. As I finish up, I want to also thank Cheryl and for her nice introduction. I want to thank Peter Berg, the chair of the department, who is on leave. He is the one who started the whole promotion process by first agreeing to put my name forward and then supporting me through FEC. So Peter, if you're tuned, I'm sure you're tuned in. Thank you for that. So my colleagues at the chemistry department, Brian, Liz, David, Margarita, thank you for making chemistry department a very good working place. I want to thank David 2 times because he has worked in my research. Also, I'm pretty sure you enjoyed some of those videos of my demos, and David shot those videos and did some of the editing of those videos. So thank you for that. During my promotion, a couple of colleagues were the first ones to read my dossier. When you're starting the process, you don't know how this is going to go. So I'm thankful because those colleagues offered me words of encouragement. So thank you, Dr. Newhove, Dr. Kim Isfeld, and Dr. Grant Vinegard. Let me thank the current Dean, Dimitris, and former Deans, Allen and Roger. So Augustana has been nice to me. I have to admit, has been nice to me. It's been a nice place to work. So I thank all faculty and staff members. There are too many to list, so please allow me to name just a few. Anne McIntosh, Valgis Manalu, Jonathan Moore, Pastor Craig Wentlad, Sandra Reen, Janet Viselius, and Doris O'Day. My colleagues in Edmonton, Mark McDermott, Jed Harrison, and Charles Lucy. Colleagues at other universities, Lotta Turner, Lud, Kingsley Donker, Sharon Brewer, Thompson Rivers University, Suleiman Oladipo, King Fahd University of Petroleum and Minerals, and Peter Mahaffey at King's University. Cosette Lemelin at CTL, she helped me develop my teaching statement. I'm thankful. And Tia Lalani, if you've seen my poster, everybody's saying it's a very good poster. She made that poster. We just talked a little bit, and all of a sudden, she produced a very good poster. So thank you. And staff at the Dean's office, I'm thankful for the organization. I thought you did a very good job. And here at the Lougheed, also, I'm quite impressed. When I got here at 6 o'clock, I'm impressed at the reception that I got and the professionalism that I saw here at the Lougheed Center as well. So we are in the middle of a global pandemic, and yet you took the time to be here. So I'm really grateful for that. I'm thankful that you were able to do that. I know even those who are not here, I understand you're in the, as I said, you're in the middle of a global pandemic, but whatever you're tuned in, thank you for taking the time to listen to my talk. So I'm not quite done yet. I'm still have a couple of slides, then I'm done. So don't clap yet. So some final thoughts. This one from Nelson Mandela. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And from Joseph Joubert is to teach is to learn twice. Because, as I said before, I think I learn as much from my students as I teach them. Last but not least, can we please be all kind to ourselves and to others? And please wear your mask. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, James. It's been a real pleasure being able to hear you talk about your entire life as a teacher, researcher, and of course, service person. We have time left for questions. So again, because we cannot pass the mic around, we have some questions that have come in by text, so I will read those to you. And I'll also try my best to field questions from the audience and give James a chance to answer. So maybe we'll start from the audience that is here in person. Does anyone have a question that you can shout out or run down to me for James? Yes, the floodlights, Paula.
I'm going to just stand here so I can try and bellow through the map. Could you talk, James, about what the experience is of training undergraduates to be mentors to teach chemistry? I think one of the interesting things that happens at Augustana is opportunities for students often go beyond what might typically happen if we had lots of graduate students available. So I'm curious about the experience of teaching students to teach your discipline, both your experience of that and if the students become better chemists from that experience.
Yes, so thank you, Paula. So the question was, what's my experience of teaching undergraduate students to teach other students? Because in most other universities, they have their graduate students, but we don't have those. So overall, it was a very positive experience. I think what surprised me is how these students went over and beyond what I expected them to. So they were professional in the lab. So when we told them that now that they're teachers and not just students, how to behave, they did that. So it looks like just because they're undergraduates is that we don't give them more to do. It's like we are restraining them. And now that we opened them to something more than they're used to, they went over and beyond. One thing that I remember surprised me in that class is the empathy my students had for the other students, and they called them kids, which was a bit funny. So they said, our kids, and yet the age difference is minimal from first year and fourth year students. So they advocated for their so-called kids. They said, oh, please treat our first year students well. So they advocated for them. They showed a lot of respect. But I think things that they gained, of course, as I said earlier, is the ability, of course, to keep, for example, things confidential, because now even if they know their marks, they can't keep discussing those with everybody. Communication skills, because the students were the ones who gave pre-labs and so on in class. So I think overall, what I saw is the potential that there is for training undergraduate. Of course, it did take a bit more time, because remember, if you have graduate students, they have at least have a degree. Our students don't have a degree, but I saw a lot of potential, and overall, I was quite happy with the experience.
Do we have another question?
I
Yes.
will follow Paula's example by trying to get at least somewhat close. James, I'm very curious about your research accomplishments, given the limited resources we sometimes have. We only recently got a lab that was built this century in the chemistry department. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you've been so successful as a researcher, despite some of the financial limitations we sometimes face?
Okay. So thank you, Brian. So Brian is one of my colleagues in the chemistry department. And so his question is, how have I been able to be successful with my undergraduate research with all the limitations that we have, lack of equipment, and so on? And I think I would say mostly perseverance, some luck as well. And I think because I was able to do electrochemistry at a generally low cost, I think that's what really helped me. I do know that some other areas of chemistry, the equipment that you need costs hundreds of thousands, maybe $1 million. So I think I was mostly lucky that electrochemistry had experiments that were good enough to actually solve a problem that you can actually publish. So I think in general, it's electrochemistry that saved me. At some time, I started talking about my research early on to students in first year. Of course, I couldn't hire them then, but maybe by the time they were in the second year, they had heard that James, or Dr. Kariuki, as they call me, does research with students. So I got them interested, and so when they came to my lab, I had to train them. Of course, again, it does take a long time to train the students, but I think overall it's electrochemistry that saved me, and its ability to do research in electrochemistry at a relatively low cost compared to other branches of chemistry. So Cheryl is looking to see if there's a question from the online audience.
Great. Thank you. Sorry for the lull. So this is a question that was texted in. What's the most impressive explosion you've had in a chem lab? You must have anticipated that one.
I did. So as some people are saying, COVID does suck, but it's here, so we have to deal with it. So just imagine there was no COVID. Right now, I would be blowing balloons all over here So one of them, so by the way, when we blow these balloons, of course, we do it for fun. But again, it's a teaching moment because there's a lot of chemical reactions happening. And of course, we explain that to our students. But one of them, explosions that I did, and I think Brian Rempo, as you saw, was involved. Of course, he's always, because he likes explosions. We did one of them a couple of years back, and the fire alarm in the building just went off. And so everybody had to evacuate the building, and then somehow we couldn't turn off the fire alarm. So it went on for about an hour. And needless to say, I did get in a little bit of trouble because you have to fill in those forms and what happened, how did it go off, and all those things. Yes, so that's my story when the fire alarm went off.
Do we have another question from the audience before I go back to, yes, please. Shout your best.
Hi, I'm James's daughter, and I guess what message would you give to teachers, young teachers or young students who aspire one day to become a professor like yourself?
Okay, so thank you. So that's Naomi, Miss Kariuki, a teacher herself at Malmo School. And the question was, what advice do I have for young teachers or those listening and aspire to be teachers and hopefully one day also become profs? I think teaching, yes, we are paid to teach, but I think it's the ultimate giving back because who here wasn't taught by a teacher, right? So everybody here was taught by a teacher. So I think that it's not the highest paid job, but I think you completely change somebody's life. They may not know it 1 year, 2 years, 3 years after leaving your class, but for sure they will know it one day in their lifetimes. So they will remember, wait a minute, I think I was told that by my teacher, but I kind of ignored it. Now I know what they were saying. So it's that lifelong connection that you make to somebody's life, whether they see it at that time or not. So it's like a selfless thing to do, to teach. So don't give up. I would say it's called a noble profession, a noble profession. So I encourage everybody listening, young kids everywhere, if you see me here standing on the stage, you too can make it one day.
Thanks, James. A question that was texted in. What is in the red cabbage soup that acts as a pH indicator? So this is going back to your hardcore chemistry roots.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. And of course, I always like doing that red cabbage. So it turns out that things that appear colorful or fruits, they have these big sounding compounds, anthocyanins and other types of compounds. It turns out that those compounds that make, for example, the red cabbage have that color are themselves actually weak acids or bases. And so it turns out that when in fact, some people have complained when they eat red cabbage that their stomach hurts. It's because it's very acidic. And so that so-called red cabbage soup is basically an acid solution that you make. And so what happens then, if you mix an acid at the base, there's a reaction, and without going into too much details, the molecule slightly changes, and it's one color in acid and another color in base. So the structure or how the compound looks changes a little bit, whether it's an acid or base, and that's why the red cabbage is either red in acids and blue in basic solutions.
Do we have another question from the audience? All right, there's well wishes as well as a question next. Good evening, James. This is a very interesting lecture and reminds me of what I experienced when I visited one of your classes last year. So you can speculate on who that was or is. Could you tell me how some of this translates into today's remote classroom? So just keep that in your head. What do you do in those virtual classes to inject the kind of humor, care, and decency that are such an important part of your in-person teaching? And there's another couple of questions, or another question, so maybe I'll just let you think about that and answer that, and then I'll come to the rest.
Sure, yeah, I have to admit that I know all of you would say the same. It's been, let me call it a struggle to teach online, especially something like chemistry that's so much hands-on. But because we were dealt the cards that we have, and we are all professionals, and we want to do a good job, so we are doing whatever it takes. So some of the things that I've been doing online perhaps is to show them a video. Of course, I want to be doing it myself. I don't want to show a video of myself. It's not quite the same thing. So showing videos, for example, and hoping, giving students, put them in groups to make them discuss, and then if I'm using Zoom to visit each of their rooms. So in summary, it's not quite the same as in person, but I'm making myself available as much as I can, and I open my videos, and hopefully students can also open their videos, which they don't like to do. So it's been a struggle, but we're making the best of it.
And certainly I can see you, James, in those videos. It's like seeing you in person. So the rest of the comment and question, is it possible to retain or preserve those qualities that make such an effective teacher in the virtual environment? And I think you have partly addressed that. And then, by the way, thanks for all the commercial breaks that are taking us around the world. I'm very envious, actually.
So thank you. When I was making those commercial breaks, I was worried the audience may not like them, so I'm happy that you like them. I didn't hear anybody booing me, so thank you. Thank you for that as well. So we're trying to see what's the next procedure is. So again, it's just to tell everybody to be hopeful and hang in there. This will come to an end, and this is the COVID thing at an end, but I think we have to trust the science. We just have to trust the science. I don't think there's any way out. You have to trust the science, wear a mask when you're told to, wash your hands, and follow regulations. And this will come to an end. I'm pretty sure about that.
Let's go back to the floor. Does anyone want to ask another question? All right, we have more coming in by text. So thank you for your presentation. You spoke about the importance of the students' ability to adapt their learning styles. Have you had to adapt your teaching style in a similar way throughout your career? And if so, what is the biggest change you've had to make? Maybe excluding COVID times.
Yes, yeah, so question about how have I adapted my teaching style. So I have to admit, it took me a long, long time to listen to my own voice over the computer. I couldn't believe that's me speaking. But once I got over that, so I was able to actually, because I recorded myself, and then I had to listen to myself, and so then I got over that. So I think what's really happening, I was empathetic before, but I've become doubly empathetic to students. Because if I'm struggling with technology, for example, I thought about my students and how they would struggle. So I've tried as much to ask students, how are you doing? What can I do? Please use the chat. So I'm encouraging them to talk to me a little bit more anytime they get into any problems or they run into any roadblocks. Also, because I'm teaching in the so-called asynchronous, so not live teaching, I've already pre-recorded all my lectures. I'm able to use the time in class to start at what's called low-hanging fruit with students. So I start them from simple. I see, okay, that's too easy for you guys. So I then go to a level 2 question. So I'm able to do that because I have the time in class. So I start them with a nice, simple question, and then I go to level 2. And then when I get to level 3 and none of them can answer, then I explain that question. So it's the ability to have a little bit of extra time where I'm not actually teaching or reading back to students stuff that they could do, read on their own in the textbook, and being able to spend that time solving questions. So that has been a real eye-opener to me. In fact, I dare say that once COVID is over and I go back to teaching classes, I think it's one of my colleagues here, Brian, who said he might flip. Anyway, flipping means teaching mostly whereby you tape yourself and then just do question and answers in class. I think I'm also going to flip once COVID is over.
I have a kind of a two-parter question. I wonder if you can think of your favorite teaching moment and your maybe least favorite teaching moment and share those with us.
I think...
in either order.
Sure. I think favorite is when you see students that you are not expecting to do well in your class. And for me, doing well doesn't mean getting an A. So doing well is just getting a decent grade. So when you see growth of a student that you are not expecting them to do well, and then they listen to what you're saying, and then they come to your office and say, Dr. Kariuki, thank you for your class. You made me do something from your class. So that the fact that they're able to appreciate my teaching, I think that those are some of the key moments. Of course, research contributions for my students, I do appreciate that as well. Least favorite, I think, and it's when, for example, you may do something to a student, a mostly marks, where you give them some low marks and they are very unhappy. And because I'm not a very good lawyer, I'm not able to argue with students for marks, so that hurts. Because how do you tell a student that you give them 54% and they want 95%? So how do you close that gap? So I struggle with that a little bit when I have to give a student a mark that's not so good and they think that their mark should be a little bit high. So it's those moments of awarding grades or marks that are not very good.
I agree, that is tough. I have a couple of questions here, and then maybe I'll send it back out to the floor, and then there's a comment that was, sort of a commemorative. So thank you for sharing your experiences and ideas about teaching. It applies far beyond chemistry. I'm interested if there are further applications for your kit in developing areas, and what could it be used for and assist these communities?
Yes. So question about the kit that we saw. Yes, so the goal, again, is to make a kit that's complete, that you actually put in your backpack and take it out of the lab. In fact, if you remember the Utoni development NGO that I saw, one of my slides, one of the goals was to actually go with these kits and use them for water testing, whether it's pH or turbidity or something else. So one of the goals, once they're complete, is to actually take them for on-site testing of water samples, because then you can obtain your water samples. You don't have to worry about transporting it to the lab. Now, my kit is not going to test for every single element or analyte in the water sample, but it can do some. So the goal was to maybe donate some of this to developing countries as well. So the kit isn't quite yet, but it's almost. Unfortunately, now with the labs closed or just opening up, that project has been delayed a little bit, but hopefully it will pick up once we fully open the labs.
Thanks. Any further questions from the floor? Tim? Come as close as you dare and use your big professor voice.
Okay, fine. So, James, I'm interested in the roles, the many roles you've played at Faculty Follies. And I'm interested to know which you think has been your best moment and how has that influenced you in your teaching? In your overall existence at Augustana.
So thank you for the question, Tim. So Faculty Follies, some of you may not know, but it's when profs behave in a non-prof way, like as silly as it can get. And for me, first of all, I hope we have Folly. I see Kim over there. I don't know when the next Folly is. I don't know if we're going to be able to have one in a COVID times. But for me, it helped me just kick back. I could be as silly as I could. There is Tim asking me that question, and yet he's the most serious-looking person. And you got in this stage, and you acted so funny. And so I also just let loose. So it's to be able to not take yourself so seriously. I think that's what my takeaway from the Faculty Follies, that there's just a time to just let back and not worry too much about other things. Just have fun. And to know that it's popular is that we had about 500 students packing the gym just to see the profs make fun of themselves. So I think that's what I would take from those, being able to just relax and not thinking about just being a professional all the time. I think that's what I take from the Faculty Follies. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Very good advice. Oh, just a minute here, I have to. Okay, I do have a cell phone, but I don't like it very much, and my kids would be laughing at me right now because I'm using Marianne's to send the last message to you. Oh, sorry. First of all, let me check. In addition to Tim, do we have any questions? Any more questions for James? All right, so I'm going to share this message with you. I don't have a question, but a message for Dr. Kariuki. I want to thank you for all you did for me during my years at Augustana. Thank you for your consistent support and for bringing chemistry alive. Your sense of humor and excitement for your subject matter is what made your classes captivating. I had the pleasure of having you join my junior high class, and you brought the same magic to my students. You bring chemistry alive with your passion, and you truly are a coach. I will never forget how you allowed me to practice my teacher writing even before I started teaching myself. I wish you all the best and keep that color in your chemistry.
So thank you very much. I think I know who that student is, but whoever you are, thank you very much for your kind words. We as profs, we do appreciate the feedback from students. So I thank you that I did make an influence in your life. And whoever you are, I know you're going to make a very good teacher. And so thank you for remembering my class and the things that I did for you.
All right, I think that is it for questions and comments. Many, many nice comments and lots of great questions. So again, thank you, James, and maybe you could join me in thanking James once again.
Thank you so much.
It's unfortunate that we can't have the wine and the food that normally goes with this event.
Okay. All right, so thank you very much. Have a good night. I will see some of you next time.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. It was greatly appreciated. Good night. Oh, yes, now.